Have you ever caught yourself overthinking, replaying the same worries again and again, and wondering why your mind feels like your worst enemy instead of your best friend? You know that little voice in your head that won't stop analyzing, predicting, and imagining the worst case scenario? We all have it. But here's the twist. What if that voice isn't always telling the truth? What if the real problem isn't life itself, but the way we believe every single thought that pops into our heads? That's the core message of Joseph Nguyen's "Don't Believe Everything You Think." It's not about positive thinking, and it's not about controlling your mind. It's about understanding how thoughts work, how they create suffering, and how to finally find peace by stepping out of their grip. Today, we're exploring a book that many readers describe as quietly life-changing. Not because it overwhelms you with 100 hacks to fix yourself, but because it invites you to notice something profound. Maybe you were never broken in the first place. Joseph Nguyen, in Don't Believe Everything You Think, doesn't hand you a toolbox of complicated techniques. Instead, he opens a window into how the mind really works, how our thoughts create the lens through which we experience life, and how peace comes not from controlling everything outside us, but from understanding what's happening inside. Think about it for a second. How often do we tell ourselves, if I just fix this job situation, or get that relationship right, or hit that financial milestone, then I'll finally feel at peace? But what Nguyen shows us is that peace isn't hiding in the future. It's not waiting on a better version of your life. It's already here. The only thing that clouds it are the thoughts we believe. So in this video, we're going to move through his book step by step. We'll look at why thoughts are not facts, why overthinking keeps us trapped in suffering, and why clarity and happiness are not things you achieve, but things you uncover once you stop wrestling with your own mind. And the beauty is, these aren't just abstract ideas. Nguyen uses examples, simple stories, and relatable moments from daily life to make the point clear. When you see thought for what it is, you begin to see yourself and your world differently. By the end, my hope is that you won't just understand Nguyen's ideas, you'll feel them. Nguyen begins with one of the most fundamental but overlooked truths. Most of our suffering doesn't come from the events that happen to us. It comes from our thoughts about those events. Let's use something we've all experienced: traffic. Two people are stuck in the same jam, on the same road, at the same time. The first person feels frustration bubbling up. They grip the steering wheel tightly, their inner monologue screaming, "Why does this always happen to me? Now I'm going to be late. People will think I don't care. This city is a mess. Nothing ever goes my way." Their stress hormones spike, their mood collapses, and by the time they arrive, they're exhausted and irritable. The second person, same exact traffic jam, pauses and takes a breath. They think, well, I can't move the cars. Maybe I'll finally listen to that podcast I downloaded. Or maybe I'll just sit quietly for a bit. Their heart rate stays steady. They might even arrive at their destination with a calmer mind than when they left. Now here's the important part. Both people experience the same external reality. The traffic jam didn't cause the suffering. The thoughts did. Nguyen compares thoughts to clouds in the sky. They drift in, they drift out, sometimes light and fluffy, sometimes heavy and stormy. But here's where most of us get trapped. We mistake the clouds for the sky. We think our thoughts are who we are. We assume they are permanent truths about ourselves and the world. But clouds are temporary. The sky, the awareness that holds them, is vast, clear, and unchanging. That's Nguyen's first powerful lesson. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness noticing them. Imagine a thought like, "I'm not good enough." If you fuse with it, if you believe it completely, it shapes your entire mood, your decisions, even your sense of identity. But if you step back and see it as just another cloud, something passing through, you create space. You realize, oh, this is just a thought. It doesn't define me. And here's the miracle. In that moment of awareness, the suffering lessens. Instead of getting dragged into every storm of negativity, you realize you can just let it float past. Nguyen explains that peace doesn't come from stopping thoughts or fighting them. Peace comes from seeing them clearly for what they are: temporary, fleeting, and not the essence of who you are. This chapter sets the foundation for everything else in the book. Once you begin to recognize thoughts as passing mental events, not unshakable truths, you open the door to a completely different way of living, one with more lightness, more freedom, and more peace. So if thoughts aren't the problem, why do we suffer so much? Nguyen explains, it's because we believe every thought that shows up. He calls this the overthinking trap. Overthinking is when we replay scenarios endlessly, trying to control outcomes that aren't even here yet. Think of it like carrying a backpack. Every worry, every memory, every what if is like a stone. One or two stones, manageable. But most of us carry hundreds of them daily, constantly predicting, regretting, analyzing. No wonder we feel exhausted. Nguyen shares a relatable example. Imagine lying in bed at night. The room is quiet, your body is ready to rest, But your mind, it's wide awake. It replays that awkward thing you said 3 days ago, imagines a disastrous meeting tomorrow, and even throws in a random, embarrassing memory from middle school for good measure. Sound familiar? This is the mind doing what it does, producing thoughts. The suffering comes when we believe those thoughts as if they're urgent truths instead of mental noise. Nguyen's key teaching here: peace doesn't come from stopping thoughts. It comes from not believing every single one. Here's one of the most liberating chapters. Nguyen insists that you are not broken. Most self-help books, he points out, subtly suggest that something is wrong with you, that you need fixing, hacking, or optimizing. But Nguyen flips the script. He says our natural state is peace. Happiness, clarity, and creativity are like sunlight. They're always there. Thoughts, especially negative, anxious ones, are just the clouds that block the light. This changes everything, because instead of exhausting ourselves trying to fix our minds, we simply begin noticing, oh, I'm caught in thought right now. That's why I feel tense. But this isn't permanent. He shares stories of people who thought they needed to rewire their entire lives, only to discover that when they stopped believing their frantic thoughts, peace naturally surfaced. Think about children. A toddler can cry furiously one moment, then laugh with pure joy the next. Why? Because they haven't learned to cling to thoughts? They let them pass. Nguyen argues that this natural resilience is still in us. We've just covered it up with years of overthinking. Nguyen emphasizes that clarity isn't something you chase. It's something that arises when thought settles. Think of a glass of muddy water. If you keep stirring it, it stays cloudy. But if you set it down and let it be still, the mud sinks and the water clears. That's exactly what happens with our minds. Awareness, the act of noticing thoughts without grabbing onto them, is like setting the glass down. Over time, clarity emerges. For example, imagine you're trying to solve a problem at work. You stress, you push, you overthink, and nothing comes. Then the moment you step away, maybe in the shower or on a walk, the solution pops into your head. Why? Because clarity arises in stillness, not in struggle. This is one of Nguyen's most practical lessons. You don't need to control or silence your thoughts. You just need to step back and see them for what they are, temporary ripples in awareness. Another powerful theme: most suffering comes from resisting what is. Nguyen shares that when we fight reality, wishing things were different, replaying should-have scenarios, we multiply our pain. Resistance is like pulling on a rope in a tug-of-war with life. The harder we pull, the more exhausted we become. But when we drop the rope, when we stop arguing with what already is, we find peace. For example, imagine it's raining on the day of your outdoor event. You can resist, complain, and spiral into negativity. Or you can accept, adapt, and maybe even discover joy in the unexpected. Acceptance doesn't mean passivity, it means clarity. It frees up energy to act wisely instead of wasting it fighting reality. Nguyen doesn't just stay in philosophy, he shares how these insights play out in real life. In relationships, instead of reacting to every thought, they must not care about me, pause. Notice it's just a thought, not a fact. Respond from clarity, not insecurity. In work, when faced with pressure, don't let your racing mind dictate your actions. Step back, breathe, and remember. Overthinking rarely produces the best solutions. In personal growth, stop chasing perfection. See that you're not broken. You're simply human, with thoughts that come and go. Growth is about awareness, not self-criticism. By the end of the book, Nguyen paints a hopeful picture. Freedom is not the absence of thought, but freedom from its control. Imagine your mind as a radio station constantly playing. You can't turn it off completely, but you can realize you're the listener, not the broadcast. You can choose to tune in or let it play in the background while you focus on life itself. Second, suffering doesn't come from life itself. It doesn't come from the traffic jam, the criticism from a colleague, or the breakup. It comes from the story we tell ourselves about those events, from believing every single thought that crosses our mind without question. Third, and this one is deeply reassuring, you are not broken. You never were. Your natural state underneath all the noise is peace, wholeness, clarity. That state doesn't need to be created. It's already there. It just begins to shine through the moment you stop over-identifying with thought. And finally, Nguyen reminds us that awareness, not control, is the key. You don't have to wrestle with your mind or try to stop thinking altogether. Instead, you step back, you observe, you notice. And in that gentle noticing, you create space for clarity, resilience, and joy to naturally emerge. Nguyen's message is simple but radical. Freedom isn't found in controlling your thoughts. It's found in realizing you don't have to believe them. And maybe the next time your mind throws you a storm, you'll pause, take a breath, and remember, you don't have to follow every cloud. So let me ask you, have you ever believed a thought that later turned out to be completely untrue? Maybe a fear, a worry, or a judgment? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if this breakdown of don't believe everything you think gave you a moment of clarity, hit that like button, subscribe for more life-changing book summaries, and share this video with someone who struggles with overthinking. Because remember, you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. And once you see that, life opens up in ways you never imagined.